Imagine being a quiet, brave 9-year-old girl stepping onto a plane, excited for a journey only to face cold stares, cruel words, and even a shocking slap from a flight attendant. What happens when no one believes you belong in a seat you rightfully paid for? What if the person who hurts you has no idea who your father really is, the CEO who owns the airline itself? This is the story of Zora James, a young girl whose quiet strength exposes a culture of discrimination hidden behind polished smiles and strict policies. On Skyline Air Flight WS-302, what should have been a simple trip turns into a painful ordeal that tests Zora's courage and dignity. But her story doesn't end there. It sparks a powerful wave of change led by her father, Malcolm James, a man forced to confront not only his daughter's suffering, but the deep flaws within the company he built. Will Zora's bravery be enough to change an entire airline? What does it take to turn silence into action? And how far will justice go when power and prejudice collide? If you believe every voice deserves to be heard and every person deserves respect, then this story is for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to follow this unforgettable journey. The bustling terminal at Washington Dulles International hummed with a steady, familiar energy. Travelers hurried by, dragging wheeled bags or balancing coffee cups, their faces a mixture of excitement, fatigue, and impatience. Overhead, speakers repeated boarding calls, their mechanical voice filling the air, but none of it registered fully in the mind of Zora James. Zora stood near gate 22, clutching her small backpack tightly with one hand and holding a well-worn sketchbook against her chest with the other. The colors on the cover were faded from years of handling, but still vibrant enough to catch the occasional glance from passing travelers. She was 9 years old, but carried herself with a quiet poise that made her seem older than her years. Her tight curls were pulled back into a loose ponytail, strands escaping to frame her face, but she didn't mind. Her lavender hoodie was slightly faded, the fabric soft and worn in all the right places, and her jeans were neatly cuffed at the ankles. Her sneakers, though scuffed, still carried the faint scent of fresh rain from a morning walk. People passed her without a second glance. Zora had grown used to being invisible. She watched with calm eyes as families gathered, business travelers typed quickly on laptops, and flight crews moved purposefully. The noise felt distant, like a separate world she observed but never quite belonged to. Her ticket was folded carefully inside her backpack, a boarding pass for first class on Skyline Air Flight WS-302 bound for San Francisco. It was a special trip, one that her father had arranged carefully, though he wouldn't be on the flight. Malcolm James was the CEO of Skyline Air, a man with a presence that commanded respect. But Zora had learned early on to keep her own strength quiet and measured. When the pre-boarding announcement crackled through the speakers, Zora lifted her head and stepped forward with practiced calm. A gate agent with a pressed uniform and an automatic smile barely registered her presence as she scanned the boarding passes. "Traveling alone today, young lady?" the agent asked with a tone that was too rehearsed to be sincere. Zora nodded without hesitation. "Yes, ma'am." Her voice was soft but steady. The gate agent hesitated for a split second, her eyes flicking over Zora as if weighing something unseen. Then she nodded and gestured toward the jet bridge. As Zora stepped onto the jet bridge, the air changed. It was cooler, quieter, charged with a different kind of energy. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as she approached the aircraft door. Her backpack felt heavier than usual on her shoulder, but she didn't let it show. The door slid open with a hiss, and Zora entered the cabin. Her eyes immediately found the familiar figure of Monica Davis, the flight attendant assigned to first class. Monica stood tall, her blonde hair pulled back into a tight bun, lips pressed into a thin line, and eyes sharp with an expression that could only be described as cold appraisal. Monica's gaze landed on Zora like a spotlight, scrutinizing her presence as if she had no right to be there. "Can I help you?" Monica's voice was clipped, her posture rigid and unwelcoming. Zora hesitated for only a moment before holding out her boarding pass. "I'm in seat 2A, she said softly. Monica glanced down briefly, lips tightening. "You're in first class." Her tone was a mixture of disbelief and thinly veiled disdain. "Yes, ma'am," Zora replied, her eyes steady and clear. A long pause stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of engines warming and muffled voices from other passengers. Monica stepped aside just enough for Zora to pass, but offered no welcoming smile, no gesture of assistance with the overhead bin or the small backpack. Zora slid into her seat and buckled her seatbelt quietly. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Zora opened her sketchbook and began to draw wings stretching wide, feathers catching the wind, a symbol of freedom and escape she held close to her heart. 20 minutes into the flight, the beverage cart began its slow journey down the aisle. Monica stopped first at seat 1B, serving a man in a crisp suit with careful precision. Then she reached 2A, where Zora sat. Monica's eyes flickered down, as if questioning if Zora was still there at all. "You know you're not supposed to drink anything you don't recognize." "Right," Monica said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, her voice dripping with mock concern. Zora looked up from her sketchbook. "May I have some orange juice? Please." Monica's head tilted, lips pursed. "Are you even allowed juice?" "Any allergies I should know about? I don't want to deal with lawsuits over a kid who thinks she can handle citrus." Zora blinked, unsure what to say. "I've had orange juice before." With a swift motion that felt anything but accidental, Monica poured the juice but tipped the cup forward slightly, spilling cold liquid down the front of Zora's hoodie. "Oh dear," Monica said with mock surprise, stepping back dramatically. "You'll need to be more careful." Zora sat still, feeling the wet fabric cling to her skin, but refusing to let tears or anger show. She reached into her backpack, pulled out a napkin, and dabbed at the stain quietly. Monica turned away without another word. From somewhere behind her, a soft voice called out, "Are you okay?" A younger flight attendant with kind eyes, Maya Lee, crouched beside Zora's seat. "You doing all right?" Zora nodded. "Yes, thank you." The cabin lights dimmed as the plane soared westward, the Rockies fading beneath clouds outside the window. Zora's sketchbook lay open on her lap, a drawing of a flight attendant with a cold smile and eyes that didn't reach her face. Above the sketch, the word "mean" was written in small, neat letters. Zora settled into her seat, the faint scent of spilled orange juice lingering on her lavender hoodie. She glanced around the first-class cabin, taking in the quiet luxury in the faces of other passengers. Most were absorbed in their own worlds, typing on laptops, reading books, or sipping drinks. Yet beneath the polished exterior of the cabin lay an undercurrent of tension that Zora felt immediately. Monica Davis had returned to the galley, but her eyes lingered on Zora, sharp and calculating. The cold dismissal wasn't just personal. It was a message to everyone around her. A child in first class was not supposed to be there, and Monica was determined to make sure Zora understood that. As the beverage cart disappeared down the aisle, a soft rustle came from the seat beside Zora. A man in his 40s, wearing a navy suit and a subtle silver tie pin, leaned slightly toward her. His eyes were kind but cautious, as if uncertain how to approach a child traveling alone. Zora gave him a small, polite smile, but said nothing. She wasn't used to conversations with strangers in places like this. The man nodded and returned his attention to his tablet, leaving her to her sketchbook. Minutes passed. Monica returned with a clipboard, eyes narrowed as she scanned the passenger manifest once again. She walked slowly toward Zora's seat, stopping just a few feet away. Her tone was clipped when she spoke, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Miss James, you do realize that first class is reserved for accompanied passengers, correct?" Zora looked up, the corners of her mouth tightening slightly. "I am traveling alone. My father booked this seat for me." Monica's expression flickered, a momentary crack in her mask of indifference. She straightened and replied, "Traveling alone or not, there are rules to follow. Unaccompanied minors aren't typically assigned first class." Zora's fingers tightened around her pencil. Inside, a small voice questioned whether to push back or stay silent. She had rehearsed this moment, knew the answer well, yet the sting of having her right questioned gnawed at her. Still, she met Monica's gaze calmly. "My ticket says 2A. That doesn't mean you belong there," Monica said sharply, then turned away, her heels clicking against the floor. The tension in the cabin grew thicker. Some passengers glanced between the two women. Others looked away, unwilling to get involved. Zora's heart pounded quietly, but her face remained composed. She opened her sketchbook and began to draw again, focusing on the fine details of the wings she loved so much. The pencil strokes were steady, but her mind was a swirl of emotions. Why was this happening? Was it because she was a child, or because she was black? The question hovered silently, unanswered but heavy. Maya Lee, the younger flight attendant, watched from the galley doorway, her eyes filled with concern, but she hesitated, torn between protocol and the instinct to protect. Zora's thoughts flickered to her father, Malcolm James. He was not just her dad, he was the CEO of Skyline Air, a man with the power to change things. But he wasn't here, not yet. Until then, Zora had to find strength within herself. The meal service began shortly after. Monica handed out menus to rows 1 and 3, but deliberately skipped row 2 where Zora sat. Instead, she placed a small wrapped chicken entree in front of her without offering any choices. Zora looked up, meeting Monica's cold stare. "I like chicken," she said quietly. Monica set the tray down with a little too much force, utensils clattering against the plastic plate. She didn't offer any help to unwrap the plastic or open containers. Zora peeled back the plastic with slow, careful movements. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her expression neutral. Every motion was deliberate, a silent message of dignity despite the humiliation. Across the aisle, the man in the navy suit tapped rapidly on his tablet but glanced up at Zora, his eyes filled with something close to regret. He gave her a small, apologetic smile, as if to say, "I see you." Zora returned to her sketchbook, writing a few words beneath a fresh drawing, "Not everyone sees." The cabin dimmed as the flight progressed. The soft hum of the engines blended with quiet conversations and the occasional clink of silverware. Zora traced lines in her sketchbook, capturing faces and moments that no one else seemed to notice. When the beverage cart returned, Monica stopped at Zora's seat again. Her voice dropped to a sharp whisper meant only for Zora. "You're not special because someone paid for your ticket." Zora swallowed the lump rising in her throat, but didn't respond. "People like you don't belong up here," Monica added, stepping close enough for her breath to brush Zora's cheek. "You think you're better than everyone else just because you sit in first class?" Zora's eyes flicked down to her sketchbook. She'd drawn a figure with sharp features and a stern face, a woman with eyes cold as ice. "Just stories," she whispered. "Stories." Monica scoffed. "You better learn to stay out of the way." The cart bumped Zora's knee as Monica pushed it forward. Zora barely whispered, "Ow," a few rows back. Maya stepped forward quickly, her eyes scanning Monica with quiet disapproval. "Everything okay here?" Maya asked softly. Monica forced a smile. "Peachy. The little one's just a bit sensitive." Maya crouched beside Zora, her voice gentle. "You doing okay?" Zora nodded, though her eyes never left Monica. The moment stretched out a fragile balance of tension, pain, and resilience. Maya lingered a moment before stepping back. Zora gripped her sketchbook tighter, drawing invisible strength from the pages. Above the hum of the plane and the whispered conversations, a quiet voice echoed inside Zora's mind. She wasn't alone. The cabin lights dimmed further as the plane climbed higher above the clouds. Zora James sat quietly, her fingers tracing the edges of her sketchbook. Her mind swirled with emotions she refused to voice aloud. The tension with Monica Davis was like a shadow hovering just beyond the soft hum of the engines. Around her, the other passengers settled into their routines, sipping drinks or adjusting pillows, unaware or unwilling to notice the quiet storm unfolding in Seat 2A. Zora's gaze drifted to the seatback screen in front of her. She tapped gently on the touchscreen, navigating to the entertainment menu, though she barely registered the images flickering on the screen. Her thoughts were elsewhere, circling the incidents that had already marked her flight with discomfort and unease. The small orange juice stain on her hoodie, cold and sticky moments ago, now dry but a constant reminder of Monica's deliberate carelessness. The clipped tones, the disdainful looks, the careless spills all etched deeply into her memory. Yet Zora remained calm. She had learned early on that anger might be loud, but silence could be more powerful. Her sketchbook lay open in her lap. With deliberate strokes, she began a new drawing, a delicate outline of wings unfurling against a stormy sky. Each line was steady, controlled, a quiet rebellion against the injustice she faced. In the rows behind, Maya Lee watched Zora with growing concern. Maya's own emotions tangled in a knot of guilt and fear. She wanted to help, but was bound by the rigid protocols of the airline. What could she say or do without risking her own position? The conflict gnawed at her silently. Zora caught Maya's glance and gave a small, reassuring nod. It was a gesture of gratitude and recognition, a silent acknowledgement that she was not completely alone. Monica Davis returned to the galley, but not before shooting one last icy look in Zora's direction. The disdain didn't waver, but beneath it, a flicker of something else, uncertainty, maybe even fear. The meal trays arrived, and Monica handed out food with robotic precision, skipping Zora's seat until the last moment. This time, She dropped the tray in front of Zora with a loud clatter that echoed through the quiet cabin. Zora carefully peeled back the plastic wrapping, her hands steady despite the embarrassment simmering beneath her skin. The chicken on tray smelled warm and inviting, but it was overshadowed by the cold reality of the moment. She thought about speaking up about telling Monica that her behavior was unacceptable, that she deserved the same respect as every other passenger. But something inside her held her back. She didn't want a scene. She didn't want to be seen as difficult or angry. Instead, she picked up her pencil and wrote a single sentence in her notebook. "They see me, but don't see me." A few rows away. Ethan Carter watched quietly. He was an older man, gray at the temples, with kind eyes that held a lifetime of experience. He had seen many injustices in his life, and yet the way Monica treated Zora stirred something deeply protective inside him. Ethan shifted in his seat, wanting to say something, to defend the child who sat so still, so composed, but social rules, unspoken boundaries, and the fear of confrontation kept his voice silent. Zora's internal struggle was fierce. She wondered if she should stay silent or demand respect. Was her quiet strength enough to carry her through, or would she have to raise her voice, risk humiliation, and fight back against the coldness of a world that too often overlooked her? Her thoughts flashed back to her father, Malcolm James, a man who wielded power with grace, who faced challenges head-on but with a measured calm. He had taught her that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes strength was a whisper. Monica reappeared by Zora's seat once more, this time with a cup of water. She set it down without a word, then leaned in slightly, her voice low but sharp. "Don't get any ideas, little girl," she whispered. "You don't belong here." The words hit Zora like a cold wind. She felt the sting but refused to cry or lash out. Instead, she closed her sketchbook and looked Monica in the eyes, steady and unwavering. "My seat is paid for," she said simply. "I belong here just as much as anyone else." Monica's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned away abruptly, her heels clicking sharply on the floor as she walked back to the galley. Zora's chest tightened. The fight was far from over, but so was her resolve. The flight continued with an uneasy rhythm. Passengers murmured softly, some casting curious glances at the unfolding drama, others pretending not to notice. The cabin air felt heavy, charged with silent tension. Maya stepped forward again, this time more determined. She approached Zora's seat carefully, offering a small smile. "Would you like anything else?" Maya asked gently. Zora shook her head, but appreciated the kindness. "Thank you." Maya lingered a moment before retreating to the galley, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Later, as the plane soared above the Rockies, the cabin lights dimmed for rest. Zora lay back in her seat, her mind racing with thoughts both painful and empowering. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded letter. It was from her father, written earlier that week. The words were full of love, encouragement, and strength. Remember, the letter read, "You are more than the world sometimes wants you to believe. Your voice matters. Your story matters, and no one can take that away from you." Zora folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into her bag. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but she was ready. The gentle hum of the airplane's engines was the only consistent sound in the cabin as the flight cruised steadily toward San Francisco. Outside the window, The vast expanse of blue sky stretched endlessly, but inside, the atmosphere felt heavy thick with tension that no one dared to voice aloud. Zora James sat quietly in her seat, fingers tracing the worn edges of her sketchbook. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, but her face betrayed none of it. She had learned long ago that strength often looked like silence. Monica Davis was back from the galley, her heels clicking sharply on the aisle's polished floor as she pushed the service cart forward. Her eyes locked onto Zora's seat, the faintest flicker of a sneer playing at the corners of her lips. To the rest of the passengers, she was simply a flight attendant doing her job, but to Zora, she was something far more ominous. Monica paused just in front of Zora's row, and the cabin seemed to hold its breath. The other flight attendants averted their eyes, some glancing uneasily in Zora's direction. The older man in the navy suit shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around the tablet he held, without a word. Monica leaned down and suddenly grabbed Zora's arm with a harsh grip. The unexpected contact made Zora flinch. Her pencil dropped from her fingers, clattering softly to the floor. "Move," Monica hissed under her breath, her voice a sharp edge. "You don't belong here." Zora's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she met Monica's glare steadily, her voice low but firm. "I'm in seat 2A. I'm not going anywhere." The other passengers began to murmur softly, the tension rising palpably. Monica's grip tightened. "You're an unaccompanied minor. You don't belong in first class. This is a mistake." Zora's throat tightened, but she fought to keep her voice steady. "It's not a mistake." At that moment, Maya Lee, the younger flight attendant, stepped quickly forward, placing a gentle hand on Monica's arm. "Hey, Monica, let's take it easy. She's just a kid. No need to make this harder." Monica pulled her arm free and turned on Maya with a glare. "I'm handling this." Maya's eyes flicked to Zora, silently pleading for patience. The older man across the aisle cleared his throat, standing to his feet. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was calm but firm, commanding attention. Monica hesitated but quickly masked any uncertainty. "No problem, sir. Just enforce an airline policy." Zora's heart hammered as she glanced at the man. His eyes were kind, but she could tell he didn't want to get involved. Monica turned her attention back to Zora, voice low but venomous. "You think because someone paid for your ticket, you can defy the rules, that you're better than everyone else." Zora's hands clenched in her lap. The humiliation stung, but something deep inside her flickered into flame. "I'm not better than anyone. I just want to be treated like I belong." Monica laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You don't belong here. You never did." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Zora's vision blurred for a moment. The weight of the insult hit harder than any physical blow could. She wanted to cry, to scream, to run away, but she stayed seated, steady and strong. Maya stepped closer, voice gentle but resolute. "Monica, that's enough. We're here to serve all our passengers with respect." Monica's eyes flashed with anger. "Respect is earned." The quiet murmur of the cabin grew louder as more passengers began to notice the unfolding confrontation. Some pulled out phones, recording discreetly. Others exchanged concerned glances. Zora's lips trembled, but she refused to give Monica the satisfaction of seeing her break. Monica's voice dropped lower, almost a hiss. "You think your daddy's money means you're special, but I see you for what you really are." That was the last straw. Zora's small hands shot out, grabbing Monica's wrist. "Stop," she said firmly, the strength in her voice surprising even herself. Monica's eyes widened in shock. No one had ever spoken to her like that. "You don't scare me," Zora continued, voice steady and unwavering. "I'm not afraid of you or anyone else here." "For a heartbeat." Monica stared, stunned by the unexpected defiance. Then, without warning, Monica's hand swung up sharply, striking Zora across the face. The cabin went silent. Zora's cheek burned from the sting. Her eyes blinked rapidly, tears threatening to fall but held back by sheer will. A collective gasp rose from the passengers. Maya rushed forward, kneeling beside Zora's seat, her hands trembling. "Are you okay?" Maya asked softly, voice shaking. Zora nodded, voice barely a whisper. "I'm fine." The man in the Navy suit stood immediately, anger flashing in his eyes. That was unacceptable. Monica straightened, her face flushing with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. She was out of line. "No," Maya said firmly, standing between Monica and Zora. "You were out of line." The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional but carrying a subtle weight. "Flight attendants, please report to the cockpit immediately." Monica hesitated, then turned sharply and strode toward the galley, her shoulders tight with fury and defeat. Passengers whispered among themselves. Phones quietly continued recording the incident. Zora's hand went to her cheek, fingertips tracing the warm sting. She blinked, then slowly reached into her backpack and pulled out her sketchbook. With trembling fingers, she opened to a blank page and began to draw. The image that emerged was stark and powerful, a small figure, alone and strong, facing down a towering figure cloaked in shadows. Beneath the drawing, Zora wrote in neat block letters, "They hit me, but I'm not broken." Maya crouched beside her, offering a small, encouraging smile. "You're incredibly brave." Zora managed a faint smile back. "Thank you." The flight had changed in that moment. The quiet strength of a child had exposed the cracks in a system built on assumptions and bias. In the cockpit, Malcolm James listened to the report with growing concern. His daughter's voice echoed in his mind, steady, strong, defiant. He knew this flight was only the beginning of a reckoning. The cabin was filled with an uneasy silence that felt heavy, as if the air itself had thickened after Monica's sharp slap. Passengers exchanged furtive glances, their expressions ranging from shock to discomfort. Some clutched their phones, unsure whether to record, to intervene, or to simply look away. Zora James sat rigidly in her seat, the heat from Monica's hand still lingering on her cheek. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her lips pressed together in determination. She knew this moment would define more than just this flight. It would mark a line she was ready to stand behind. Maya Lee remained kneeling beside Zora, her presence a quiet reassurance. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked softly, voice tinged with genuine concern. Zora nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm fine, really." Maya's eyes searched hers, reading the unspoken struggle within the young girl. "If you need anything, just let me know. I'm here." The passengers around began to settle, but the atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. What was once just another routine flight now carried the weight of a silent battle, one of courage, injustice, and witness. Ethan Carter, the man in the Navy suit, took a deep breath and leaned over to Maya. "We can't just sit here," he said quietly. "Something needs to be done." Maya glanced toward Monica's retreating figure in the galley. I want to help, but the rules. Her voice trailed off, conflicted. Sometimes rules need to be broken, Ethan replied firmly. Across the aisle, a young mother clutched her toddler tightly, whispering reassurances as her eyes darted nervously toward the scene. A couple in business attire exchanged worried looks, their fingers tightening around their wine glasses. Zora's thoughts drifted inward. She felt the eyes of strangers upon her, some filled with pity, others with silent judgment. She longed for a familiar hand, for the steady presence of her father, Malcolm James, but he was miles away, and the weight of her solitude pressed down. She opened her sketchbook once more, flipping to a blank page. Her pencil hovered, then began to move delicate lines forming the image of a lone tree standing strong against a storm. Roots deep in the earth, branches reaching upward despite the wind. The drawing was a reflection of her spirit, grounded yet reaching, vulnerable yet resilient. Maya returned, this time carrying a small bottle of water and a packet of tissues. She handed them to Zora gently. Here, you might need this. Zora took them with a grateful smile, her fingers brushing Maya's briefly. A spark of trust kindled between them. As the flight attendants moved down the aisle, a hush fell. Monica had not yet returned, and the tension was palpable. Suddenly, a soft chime sounded from the cockpit. The captain's voice came through the intercom, steady and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into San Francisco International Airport. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. The announcement was a stark reminder that the flight was nearing its end. But for Zora, the real journey was just beginning. Behind the scenes, word of the incident had reached the corporate offices. Malcolm James sat in his sleek corner office, the city skyline stretching beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. His phone vibrated constantly, messages from legal teams, PR officers, and concerned executives filling his inbox. But his mind was elsewhere, on his daughter, on the injustice she had faced. He knew this was not just a personal issue. It was a reflection of systemic failures, of a culture that had allowed prejudice and cruelty to fester beneath the surface. Back on the plane, Maya stayed close to Zora, offering quiet comfort. Passengers whispered among themselves, some sharing videos and photos, others making silent vows to speak out. Zora's gaze lifted to the window. The sun was setting, painting the clouds with hues of orange and pink. It was beautiful, and yet the beauty felt distant from the turmoil she felt inside. She turned back to her sketchbook, now filled with images and words that spoke louder than any voice could. Each page was a testament to pain, to strength, to hope. The flight attendants began preparing for landing, moving swiftly but with an air of tension. Monica did not return to the cabin, instead speaking with the captain in the cockpit. Maya leaned in close to Zora and whispered, "You're incredibly brave. What happened wasn't your fault." Zora smiled faintly. "Thank you." The plane touched down with a gentle bump, the wheels rolling steadily on the runway. Passengers began to gather their belongings, the hum of conversations growing louder. Zora remained seated, waiting for someone from the airline to escort her through the terminal. She hugged her sketchbook tightly, the pages worn from constant use. As the cabin doors opened, Zora stepped off the plane, blinking at the bright lights of the airport. A small group of airline staff awaited her, two executives holding tablets, scanning for her name. Behind them stood Malcolm James, His presence was commanding yet calm. The crowd near him parted instinctively as he approached. Zora felt a mixture of relief and nervousness. Her father's eyes softened as he reached out his hand. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him. For a moment, the noise of the terminal faded. There was only the quiet strength between father and daughter. Malcolm gently pulled back and looked down at the sketchbook in her hand. "Tell me everything." Zora opened it to a page she had not shown anyone yet, a drawing of Monica, the flight attendant, looming large and menacing over a small, determined girl. He read the words beneath. "They hit me, but I'm not broken." His jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened with resolve. This was no longer just a family matter, it was a call to action. The cabin remained tense. Its fragile calm shattered the moment Monica Davis's hand connected with Zora James's cheek. The sharp crack echoed faintly against the soft hum of the engines. The passengers were stunned into silence. No one had expected such a sudden, violent outburst in the pristine environment of first class. Zora's hand instinctively rose to her burning cheek. The sting was sharp, but more than physical. It was the weight of humiliation, of injustice, of being seen as less than she was. Her breath hitched, but she forced herself to stay composed. The tears threatening to spill held back by sheer willpower. Maya Lee dropped to her knees beside Zora, her voice urgent yet soft. "Are you okay? Do you want me to get some help?" Zora nodded, blinking rapidly to clear her vision. "I'm okay," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. "I'm fine." The man in the Navy suit, Ethan Carter, stood quickly, his face a mask of anger and disbelief. "That was completely unacceptable," he said firmly. "You have no right to lay hands on a child." Monica's lips pressed into a thin line, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of anger and shame, but her pride would not let her back down. "She was provoking me," Monica snapped. "This is a professional environment." A chorus of murmurs swept through the cabin. Some passengers shook their heads in disapproval. Others pulled out their phones, quietly capturing the scene unfolding before them. Maya stood, placing herself between Monica and Zora protectively. There is no excuse for what happened. This child deserves respect and safety. The intercom buzzed softly. The captain's voice filled the cabin. Calm, but carrying weight. "Flight attendants, please report to the cockpit immediately." Monica hesitated, her eyes darting toward the cockpit door. Without another word, she turned and walked away briskly, her shoulders tense and rigid. Zora sank back into her seat, her hand still pressed lightly to her cheek. She felt exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but beneath the pain was a fierce, growing fire, a determination not to be broken. Maya returned, carrying a small bottle of water and a fresh napkin. "Here," she said gently, handing them to Zora. "If you need anything, I'm here." Zora managed a faint smile. "Thank you." The other passengers began to settle again, but the atmosphere had shifted irreversibly. The incident was no longer just between two people. It had become a quiet reckoning witnessed by many. Ethan Carter sat back down, his eyes fixed on Zora with a new sense of respect. He leaned toward Maya and whispered, "We have to make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug." Maya nodded, her expression grim. "I agree. But it's not just Monica. There's something deeper here, a culture that allows this behavior." Zora opened her sketchbook once more, flipping to a new page. Her pencil moved swiftly, capturing the raw emotion she felt inside, The drawing showed a small girl standing alone against a towering figure. The girl's eyes were fierce, unyielding. Beneath the image, she wrote, "I am not invisible." Her gaze lifted toward the window, where the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting golden light across the clouds. It was beautiful and hopeful, a stark contrast to the storm inside her. Malcolm James sat in the Skyline Air corporate office, the city skyline glowing in the fading light. His phone buzzed incessantly, but his thoughts were with his daughter. He had just received the initial report about the incident and was already formulating his response. He knew this was bigger than a single flight attendant's misconduct. It was a reflection of systemic failure, a culture of silence and bias that had no place in his company. He picked up the phone and dialed his head of human resources. "We need a full investigation immediately," he said firmly, "and this has to be handled with the utmost transparency." Back on the plane. Maya approached the cockpit door. She knocked softly, then stepped inside when invited. Inside. The captain and Monica stood tensely. The captain's expression was serious as he listened to Maya's report. "We need to ensure the safety and dignity of all passengers," Maya said firmly. "This incident cannot be ignored." The captain nodded solemnly. "Agreed. Monica will be removed from duty pending investigation." Monica's face paled, but she said nothing. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, the cabin crew moved with a quiet urgency. The passengers sensed that something significant was unfolding. Zora sat quietly, clutching her sketchbook. Her cheek throbbed, but her spirit remained unbroken. When the wheels touched down, the cabin filled with the soft sounds of seat belts being unfastened and passengers preparing to disembark. Zora waited patiently, knowing she would be met by someone from the airline. She was ready. As the door opened and the jet bridge connected, Zora stepped off the plane, blinking against the bright terminal lights. Two airline executives awaited her, scanning tablets and speaking quietly. Behind them, a tall figure approached Malcolm James. His eyes met Zora's, warm and steady. He knelt down and opened his arms. Zora stepped into his embrace without hesitation, the relief flooding through her in a wave. She pulled back slightly and held out her sketchbook. Malcolm turned the pages carefully, his expression darkening as he read the words she had written. "This ends now," he said softly but firmly. "I promise you, it ends now." The bustle of San Francisco International Airport felt distant to Malcolm James as he stepped off the private elevator and walked through the secure terminal corridor. His steps were measured and purposeful, each one echoing a deep resolve. His mind replayed every detail of the report he had just received, the humiliation, the violence, the silent suffering his daughter endured. This was personal, yet it was more than that. It was a reckoning he was determined to face head-on. Around him, staff in Skyline Air uniforms moved with quiet efficiency, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the calm exterior of their CEO. Malcolm's dark eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Zora among the sea of travelers. When he spotted her, small and composed, clutching her sketchbook, a mixture of pride and pain washed over him. Zora noticed her father immediately. Despite her exhaustion and the lingering sting on her cheek, she straightened, a subtle flame of strength igniting in her gaze. Malcolm knelt down beside her, his presence a steady anchor. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Zora nodded, but her eyes held the weight of everything she had endured. "I'm fine, Daddy," she said softly, Though the words carried more bravery than truth, Malcolm took her hand in his, firm and reassuring. "We're going to make sure this never happens again." The small group of airline executives trailing behind him began to gather. Cameras from nearby passengers flickered to life, capturing this powerful reunion. The world was watching, and Malcolm intended to use that attention as a catalyst for change. He stood, turning to face the cluster of staff and bystanders. His voice was calm, but carried the authority of a man accustomed to command. "Monica Davis," he said, eyes locking onto the woman standing rigidly at the edge of the group. "You were responsible for the mistreatment of my daughter." Monica's face paled. She opened her mouth to speak but faltered under his steady gaze. "This behavior is unacceptable," Malcolm continued, "not just because she is my daughter, but because no passenger, no child deserves to be treated with such cruelty." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Passengers who had witnessed the incident exchanged glances, some nodding in silent agreement. Malcolm's voice lowered slightly, filled with a quiet intensity. "I failed to protect my daughter from the very people who are supposed to serve her. That failure ends today." He gestured toward two executives nearby. "Remove Monica Davis's badge, credentials, and access immediately. Effective now." Monica's lips trembled. "You can't do this. I've worked here for 15 years, and that is exactly why this culture needs to change," Malcolm replied, his tone unwavering. He turned to the crowd, addressing the assembled staff and witnesses. "We will not tolerate discrimination or abuse, not from any employee, regardless of tenure or position." A hush fell over the crowd as Malcolm spoke of accountability and responsibility. He wasn't just punishing one person, he was calling for a systemic overhaul. Zora watched her father with wide eyes, a mixture of admiration and hope blossoming inside her. For the first time since the flight began, she allowed herself to breathe a little easier. Malcolm reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook, Zora's sketchbook. He opened it carefully, flipping through the pages filled with drawings and words. "This," he said, voice steady, "is truth, witness, courage." He looked directly at Monica. "You may have forgotten who she is, but I have not." The tension between them was palpable. Monica's eyes flickered with a mixture of shame, fear, and anger. She swallowed hard, but said nothing. Malcolm's gaze swept the crowd again. "Everyone who works for Skyline Air must understand that our commitment to safety, dignity, and respect is non-negotiable." The CEO's words resonated beyond the terminal walls, carried by the cameras and phones recording every moment. As the crowd began to disperse, Malcolm knelt again beside Zora, his voice softer now. "You were braver than I could have ever asked." Zora looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I wanted to be strong. You were," he assured her, "and together, we're going to make sure no one else has to be outside." The California sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the tarmac. The journey ahead for Skyline Air was daunting, but Malcolm was ready to lead the charge toward justice and change. The quiet conference room at Skyline Air headquarters was filled with an air of anticipation and tension. Malcolm James stood at the head of the polished oak table, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the company's senior leadership. They were a mixture of seasoned veterans and corporate strategists, many of whom had been with the airline for decades. Yet today, their usual confidence was replaced with unease. Malcolm's voice was calm but resolute. Yesterday's incident involving my daughter has exposed a deep fault line in our company, a culture that has tolerated, even encouraged, discrimination and mistreatment under the guise of protocol. The room fell silent. No one dared interrupt. He continued, Monica Davis's actions were unacceptable, but she's not the only one responsible. We must look inward and acknowledge the systemic failures that allowed such behavior to go unchecked. A senior executive cleared his throat. Malcolm, while the incident was regrettable, we must consider the impact on the company's reputation. Perhaps a public apology and disciplinary action would suffice. Malcolm shook his head slowly. No, this is not about reputation management. It's about doing what is right. We cannot afford to hide behind PR statements or half measures. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I have reviewed reports, employee feedback, and anonymous complaints. The pattern is clear. There's a culture of silence and complicity. Employees fear speaking out. Passengers, especially those who don't fit the traditional profile, are marginalized. Several executives exchanged uneasy glances. Malcolm continued. We will implement mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all employees, establish anonymous reporting channels, and create a dedicated task force to oversee equity and inclusion. He fixed his gaze on the room. This is not a request. It is a mandate. Skyline Air will be a leader in creating a safe, respectful environment for every passenger. Regardless of age, race, or background, a younger executive raised a hand tentatively. What about the staff who feel unfairly targeted by these measures? Some may see this as punitive. Malcolm responded firmly. Accountability is not punishment. It is responsibility. We will support our employees through education and dialogue, but discrimination and abuse will not be tolerated. The meeting stretched on, discussions turning to logistics, timelines, and communication strategies. Malcolm's vision was clear, a fundamental shift in the airline's culture. Back in the airport terminal, Zora James sat quietly with her father, her sketchbook open on her lap. She traced her fingers over a new drawing, a soaring bird breaking free from chains. It was a symbol of liberation, hope, and strength. Malcolm looked down at the pages, his expression softening. You've captured something powerful here. Zora smiled faintly. It's how I feel, like I want to be free from all the things that hold me down. Malcolm nodded. And you will be. We're going to change that. Their moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Maya Lee stepped inside, holding a folder of reports and passenger feedback. I wanted to update you, she said. Since the incident, we've received dozens of messages from passengers and employees. Many shared stories of similar experiences, some more severe. Zora's eyes widened. So many, Maya nodded. It's not just one flight or one employee. This is a widespread issue. Malcolm stood, his jaw set. Then, our work is clear. We must listen, learn, and act. He turned to Zora. Your courage has sparked a movement inside this company. Zora looked up, a flicker of hope shining through her fatigue. Maybe things can really change. Malcolm smiled. They will, and you'll be part of that change. As they spoke, the airline's communications team prepared a public statement. Malcolm insisted on a message of honesty and accountability, refusing to gloss over the truth or minimize the pain experienced by passengers like his daughter. Later that evening, the statement was released. It acknowledged the incident, apologized sincerely, and outlined the steps Skyline Air would take to rebuild trust and ensure respect for all travelers. News outlets picked up the story quickly, the viral video from the flight sparking conversations nationwide. Advocacy groups praised Malcolm's leadership, while calls for industry-wide reforms grew louder. Amid the whirlwind, Zora found solace in the quiet moments with her father. Together, they planned their next steps, meeting with employee groups, attending training sessions, and speaking publicly about the importance of dignity and respect. Malcolm's commitment was unwavering. "This is not just about Skyline Air," he told Zora one evening. "It's about setting a new standard for how we treat each other in our skies and beyond." Zora looked out the window at the city lights below. "I want to help," she said softly, "to make sure no one else feels invisible." "You will," Malcolm promised. "You already are." The journey ahead was daunting, but in that moment, hope was stronger than fear. The morning sun filtered softly through the large windows of Skyline Air's headquarters, casting long shadows across the bustling office. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of urgency and purpose, a direct result of the events that had unfolded just days before. Malcolm James moved through the corridors with a quiet determination that drew the attention of every employee he passed. His presence was a living reminder of the change that had been set in motion. The company's internal communication platform was flooded with messages from employees expressing support, to passengers sharing their own experiences, to advocates calling for industry-wide reform. The air was thick with a collective demand for accountability and transparency. In a spacious conference room, Malcolm sat with the Human Resources Director and the legal team, reviewing the disciplinary measures being taken against Monica Davis. The decision was firm. Monica would be immediately suspended pending a full investigation, her access to company systems revoked, and her credentials stripped. "This is necessary," Malcolm said, his voice steady but resolute. Her actions were unacceptable. "But this is also about setting a precedent. Everyone within Skyline Air must understand that such behavior will not be tolerated." The legal team nodded in agreement, recognizing the gravity of the situation and the company's responsibility to lead by example. Meanwhile, Maya Lee had become a key figure in the company's efforts to rebuild trust and ensure safety. She was part of a new task force dedicated to cultural sensitivity and passenger welfare. Her first-hand experience made her a powerful advocate, and she worked tirelessly to develop training programs that would address the gaps in understanding and empathy that had allowed discrimination to persist. Back in the quiet of his office, Malcolm received a steady stream of emails and calls from concerned shareholders and media outlets. The stock price had dipped slightly in the wake of the incident, but many investors expressed cautious optimism about the leadership's swift response and commitment to change. Malcolm knew this was just the beginning. The real work lay ahead, transforming policies, reshaping corporate culture, and healing the wounds inflicted on passengers like his daughter. Zora's sketchbook, now worn and filled with powerful images and words, was a constant companion. Each drawing told a story of resilience and hope. One page showed a pair of wings, silver and strong, a symbol of the new initiative Skyline Air planned to launch a commitment to every passenger's dignity and safety. At a company-wide meeting, Malcolm addressed the staff directly. His tone was both humble and commanding. "We are at a crossroads," he said. "Our legacy will not be defined by this incident alone, but by how we respond to it. Our commitment must be unwavering. We will implement comprehensive training, anonymous feedback systems, and a dedicated liaison for vulnerable passengers, especially unaccompanied minors." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. "Each of you plays a role in this change." Malcolm continued, "We owe it to our passengers, to our colleagues, and to ourselves to create an environment where respect and kindness are the norm, not the exception." In the days that followed, letters and messages poured in from across the country. A young boy from Atlanta shared his story of being singled out on a school trip flight. A flight attendant from Chicago recounted moments of doubt and redemption after witnessing the viral video. A woman from Minneapolis wrote about how the incident reminded her that silence is a choice and courage is a responsibility. Each letter was a testament to the widespread impact of the incident, a call for continued vigilance and change. Zora read through these messages with wide eyes, feeling the connection to others who had faced similar struggles. She shared them with her father, who listened intently, his expression a mixture of pride and sorrow. One evening, as they sat together in their home, Malcolm presented Zora with a small silver pin shaped like a pair of wings. "This is for you," he said softly, "a reminder that you are stronger than any storm, and that your voice matters." Zora held the pin in her palm, feeling its cool weight. "I want to wear this every day." Malcolm smiled, his heart full, and every day, "You'll remind us all why we fight for change." The quiet hum of the evening settled over the James family home as Zora sat cross-legged on the living room floor surrounded by her art supplies. Colored pencils, markers, and sheets of paper were scattered around her like pieces of a puzzle she was quietly assembling. The walls of the room seemed to absorb the soft glow of the lamps, wrapping the space in warmth and comfort that contrasted sharply with the turmoil she had endured days before. Her sketchbook lay open before her, filled with images that told the story of her flight: the cold stares, the spilled juice, the slap, and yet, amidst those painful memories, there were also pictures of hope. Wings soaring through storm clouds, hands reaching out in solidarity, and faces of strangers who had silently supported her in that moment. Malcolm James watched her from the doorway, his expression a blend of pride and empathy. He had returned home after a long day of meetings and interviews, but the fatigue in his eyes was softened by the sight of his daughter so deeply immersed in her art. He stepped quietly across the room and sat beside her without a word, his presence a steady comfort. Zora looked up briefly, a small smile touching her lips. "Still drawing," Malcolm said softly. "Always," she replied. "It helps me make sense of things." He nodded, understanding completely. "Your drawings tell a story, one that needs to be heard." Zora hesitated, her fingers lingering on a fresh page. "Sometimes I wonder why people are so cruel, why they don't see what's right in front of them." Malcolm sighed, pulling her gently into a hug. "It's not about what they don't see, Zora. Sometimes it's about fear, ignorance, and sometimes it's about power." She pulled back slightly, eyes searching his face. "But we can change that, right? We can make people see. We can," he said firmly. "And that's why what you did was so brave. You stood tall, even when it was hard." Zora nodded, the weight of those words settling deep within her. "I didn't want to be the one to start a fight. I just wanted to be treated like I belonged. And you were," Malcolm said, his voice unwavering. "You belong in every seat, on every flight, in every part of this world." The room grew quiet again, filled with the kind of silence that spoke volumes. For a moment, father and daughter simply sat together, bound by love and the unspoken understanding of a journey that was far from over. Later that evening, Malcolm pulled out Zora's sketchbook and turned to a page she hadn't shown him before. It was a drawing of a paper airplane caught in a storm, its trajectory uncertain but determined. "Do you want to tell me about this one?" he asked gently. Zora's eyes brightened with a mixture of sadness and hope. "It's like life sometimes. You try to fly, but the storm keeps pushing you down. You have to find a way to keep going, to find shelter." Malcolm smiled, his heart full. "And you've done just that." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a silver pin shaped like wings, engraved with Zora's initials. "For you," he said, "to remind you that you've flown through storms before and you'll do it again." Zora took the pin carefully, the cool metal warm in her hand. "Thank you, Daddy. You're different now," Malcolm said softly. "So am I." That night, as Zora lay in bed clutching her teddy bear and the silver wings pinned to her pillowcase, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in days. The storm was still there, but she was no longer alone in it. The weeks following the incident unfolded with a steady rhythm of change and reflection. Skyline Air was no longer just an airline, it had become a symbol of a larger movement toward justice, respect, and accountability. Malcolm James stood at the forefront of this transformation, leading with humility and resolve that inspired both employees and passengers alike. The new initiatives were rolled out with careful planning. Mandatory cultural sensitivity training became a core part of employee education. Staff at every level were required to participate in workshops designed not only to educate, but to foster empathy and understanding. These sessions included real stories like Zora's that challenged long-held assumptions and biases. An anonymous feedback system was launched, giving employees and passengers a safe space to report concerns without fear of retaliation. The company's leadership made clear that every report would be taken seriously, investigated thoroughly, and acted upon swiftly. Among the most impactful changes was the creation of a dedicated liaison program for unaccompanied minors and other vulnerable passengers. Trained staff members were assigned to personally assist these travelers throughout their journey, ensuring their safety, comfort, and dignity were prioritized. Malcolm often visited training sessions, speaking directly to employees. His presence reminded everyone that leadership was about accountability, not just authority. "This is more than policy," he told a room full of flight attendants and ground staff. "It's about culture, about how we treat each other when no one is watching." Meanwhile, the public response was powerful. News outlets continued to cover Skyline Air's reforms, highlighting the company's willingness to confront its shortcomings head-on. Advocacy groups applauded the leadership for setting an example in an industry that often resisted change. Letters poured in from across the country. Marcus, a boy from Atlanta, shared how he had once been singled out and humiliated on a school trip flight. Rosa, a flight attendant from Chicago, wrote about how the incident inspired her to speak up against discriminatory behaviors she had witnessed but never challenged. Another letter came from Minneapolis, from a woman who wrote, "You help me see that silence is a choice and courage is a responsibility." Zora read these letters with a mixture of awe and humility. She wasn't just a victim anymore, she was a catalyst, a voice that had sparked a larger conversation. At home, Malcolm and Zora often sat together in the evenings, discussing the impact their story was having. The media attention was overwhelming at times, but they both understood the importance of sharing their truth. "You're changing lives," Malcolm said one night, his voice filled with pride. Zora smiled, looking down at her sketchbook filled with new drawings, images of unity, strength, and hope. Skyline Air also introduced a new symbol as part of its commitment to change. A pair of small silver wings, delicate but strong, engraved with the initials of the child wearing them. These pins were to be given to every unaccompanied minor traveling with the airline, a token of protection and belonging. The first day of summer brought a quiet celebration. Malcolm and Zora walked side by side along a peaceful beach trail near Montauk. The air was warm and the sky a soft blue fading into sunset. No cameras, no press, no official statements, just father and daughter enjoying the moment. Zora collected shells, her pockets filling with treasures of the sea. Malcolm let the sand sift through his fingers, a rare smile touching his lips. At one point, Zora stopped and turned to him, eyes thoughtful. "Do you think people really change?" Malcolm looked out over the horizon before answering. "Some don't, but I believe the brave ones do." She considered this, then pointed at herself. "I was brave." "Right, the bravest," he said without hesitation. Then, after a pause, he added softly, "even braver than me." Zora smiled genuinely. The first time in days her happiness reached her eyes. "Maybe next time," she said, "we'll fly together." Malcolm chuckled. "No," he replied. "Next time you'll fly and I'll be in seat 2A. They walked on, the waves breaking gently beside them, the future uncertain but full of hope. The night was quiet in the James family home. The soft glow of a bedside lamp illuminated the pages of Zora's sketchbook, which lay open on her nightstand. She had just finished writing her final entry for the day, words that captured the storm she had weathered and the strength she had found within. Airplanes are made to fly through storms. People are not. But sometimes the storm makes you lighter, makes you braver, makes you real. She closed the sketchbook gently and placed it back on the nightstand. Her teddy bear rested beside it, a small comfort in a world that had not always been kind. Malcolm stood quietly in the doorway, watching his daughter sleep peacefully. The weight of the past weeks rested heavily on his shoulders, but in this moment he felt a flicker of hope. He thought about the journey ahead, the work still to be done, the battles yet to be fought. But, more importantly, he thought about the courage of a small girl who had changed everything simply by refusing to be invisible. The next morning, Skyline Air's internal platform buzzed with a message from Malcolm himself. There was no corporate jargon, no carefully crafted spin, just honesty and resolve. "Yesterday, Skyline Air failed a child. That child was my daughter, but this is not just about her. It is about the patterns we have tolerated, the people we have protected, and the silence we have worn like armor. That ends now. Our skies will be as safe, fair, and respectful as we promise in our commercials, not just for the privileged, but for everyone." The message resonated deeply within the company and beyond. Employees shared it widely, inspired by the leadership's commitment to real change. At school, Zora found herself surrounded by new friends who admired her strength and creativity. She no longer felt invisible, but instead saw herself as part of a larger story, one that included hope, justice, and community. Her art continued to flourish, each drawing a testament to resilience and truth. The wings she often sketched were no longer just a symbol of escape, but of freedom and belonging. Malcolm returned to Skyline Air headquarters with renewed determination. He met regularly with the board of directors, pushing for policies that would sustain the cultural transformation. He knew that true change required vigilance and courage from everyone involved. One day, as he prepared for a major industry conference, he received a package addressed to Zora. Inside were dozens of letters from across the country from children, parents, flight attendants, and strangers who had been moved by their story. A boy named Marcus from Atlanta wrote about how he felt seen for the first time after years of being overlooked. A flight attendant named Rosa from Chicago expressed gratitude for the courage to speak out, and a woman from Minneapolis wrote, "You remind us that silence is a choice, and courage is a responsibility." Zora read each letter carefully, her heart swelling with a sense of connection and purpose. She knew that while her journey had been difficult, it had opened doors for others. That summer, the Silver Wings pin became a symbol of hope and inclusion across Skyline Air. Unaccompanied minors proudly wore them, a reminder that they belonged just as much as anyone else. On a warm afternoon, Malcolm and Zora stood together on a quiet beach. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. Zora held a small shell in her hand, turning it thoughtfully. "Do you think people really change?" she asked, her voice soft. Malcolm smiled gently. "Some don't, but I believe the brave ones do." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "I was brave." "Right, the bravest," he replied without hesitation. Then, with a playful grin, "even braver than me." Zora laughed, the sound bright and free. "Maybe next time we'll fly together." He shook his head with a smile. "No, next time you'll fly, and I'll be in seat 2A. As they walked along the shore, the waves lapping gently at their feet, the future seemed full of possibility, a future shaped by courage, love, and the belief that every voice matters. Zora's story is more than just an incident on a plane. It's a mirror reflecting the harsh realities of discrimination that many face every day. It reminds us that silence is a choice, and courage is a responsibility. Through her quiet strength and the unwavering support of her father, we see how injustice can be challenged and how real change begins with standing up for what is right. This story leaves us with a powerful message: no one should ever be made to feel invisible or unworthy because of who they are. It is a call to all of us to confront prejudice wherever it hides, to demand respect for every human being, and to nurture empathy in every interaction. Thank you for watching and sharing in Zora's journey. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it to raise awareness, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. Together, we can create a world where dignity and justice fly first class for everyone. Stay tuned for our next video. You won't want to miss what's coming next.